He said he never really slept, but for those who worked themselves to the bone, it might as well have been wrapped in silence. A cold December wind whipped down the avenue, scattering old newspapers and rattling against the steel trash cans. At 2 in the morning, Fifth Avenue looked like the skeleton of itself, empty storefronts, dim streetlights, the hum of a taxi cruising by without a passenger. And there, pressed against the side of a closed bakery, lay a woman. She was bundled in an old quilt, the kind that had been washed so many times its colors had bled into each other until it was nothing more than a faded patchwork of gray. Her shoes were lined neatly beside her, toes pointing out toward the gutter. A cheap canvas bag sat tucked beneath her arm, as if it were the last thing she had worth guarding. Her name was Maria. Only a few hours earlier, she had been inside one of the tallest glass towers in Manhattan, dusting crystal chandeliers, polishing marble floors, folding towels in a penthouse so extravagant it could have swallowed her entire apartment complex back in Queens. But apartments required rent. Rent required money. And the past month had bled her dry, so now she lay on the sidewalk, her body curled against the winter chill, trying to quiet the ache in her stomach. Her landlord had changed the locks that afternoon. "You're behind 3 weeks, Maria," he'd said without even meeting her eyes. "I can't let this slide again." Maria had nodded, clutching her purse as if the few crumpled bills inside might suddenly multiply. She hadn't begged. Begging never helped. Instead, she'd walked to the one place she knew well, Manhattan's gleaming skyscrapers, because somehow sleeping near them felt safer than hiding in the alleys. A black SUV slowed at the corner. Its headlights washed over her for a second, then passed. But the second car did not dot. It was a deep navy Bentley, its body polished so flawlessly the streetlights shimmered across it like water. The car coasted to the curb. The back door opened, and a man stepped out. He wasn't dressed like someone who should have been on that street at that hour. His suit was dark and fitted, a wool overcoat slung across his shoulders, leather gloves. Hugging his hands, he had that sharp, commanding look about him, clean lines, expensive watch, hair combed into place as though he had a stylist on call, even at midnight. Alexander Wright. In the business pages, they called him ruthless. The youngest billionaire in New York, 38, a man who had transformed his father's real estate empire into a global juggernaut. Investors trusted him. Competitors feared him. Women whispered his name with a kind of hushed awe. But in that moment, standing on the sidewalk, all Alexander saw was a figure curled up like discarded laundry. He didn't recognize her at first, not until he caught a glimpse of her face. When the wind lifted her hair, Maria, his maid, the same woman who every morning knocked softly before entering his penthouse suite. The same one who hummed under her breath while folding his shirts, who never once complained when he asked for something to be redone. He had noticed her kindness before, in small ways. The way she left fresh coffee in the kitchen, even though it wasn't part of her duties. Or how she'd smiled at his niece when she visited. But he had never imagined he'd find her here, on the street. Maria. His voice cracked the silence like glass. Maria startled awake, her eyes wide, darting until they settled on him. She scrambled to sit up, tugging her quilt around her shoulders, as though embarrassed to be seen. "Mr. Wright," she whispered, her voice carrying both shock and dread. He stepped closer, frowning. "What the hell are you doing out here?" I'm fine," she said quickly, rising to her feet. The effort was shaky, her legs stiff from the cold. "I just needed some fresh air. I'll go." "Fresh air?" His tone sharpened. "Maria, it's 2 in the morning. You're on a sidewalk." Her lips trembled. She tried to force a smile, but it broke halfway. "I'm okay, really." Alexander studied her. Her hair was tangled from the wind. Her coat, a thin thrift store jacket, looked like it belonged in a different decade. And her hands, clutching the quilt, were raw from the cold. "You're homeless," he said flatly. The word hit her like a slap. She flinched. "No, No, Maria, his voice softened. How long? Her throat worked as though swallowing stones. Finally she whispered, since this afternoon. Something twisted in his chest. He didn't know her story. He'd never asked. She'd been just another part of his household staff, efficient and quiet, always vanishing before he even got home from his meetings. And now, the reality of her life was spread out on the pavement like an open wound. Behind him, his driver shifted uneasily. Sir, do you want me to? Stay in the car, Alexander ordered without looking back. Maria hugged herself, avoiding his gaze. Please, don't tell anyone. I'll figure it out. I just need a few days. I'll find somewhere. He stared at her, a muscle in his jaw twitching. You'll freeze before you figure it out. She shook her head desperately. I can't ask for help. I don't want to lose my job. For the first time in years, Alexander felt the strange, disarming sensation of not knowing what to say. He had built towers of glass and steel. He had bent city councils to his will. Yet here, with one of the women who scrubbed his kitchen floors, he felt powerless against the weight of her pride. Finally he said quietly, You're coming with me. Her eyes shot up. No, sir, I can't. You can, he countered, his tone brooking no argument. You will. I'm not leaving you here. The determination in his voice left no room for protest. She hesitated only a moment longer before he placed his hand gently on her arm, guiding her toward the Bentley. Maria's heart pounded so loud she thought the driver might hear it. This couldn't be happening. She had spent the past 5 years blending into the background, invisible, just a pair of hands cleaning someone else's dream. And now, here was the man who lived in the clouds, reaching down to pull her from the gutter. The car door closed with a soft thud, sealing her inside a world that smelled faintly of leather and cologne. She sank into the seat, clutching her bag. As though it were a lifeline, Alexander slid in beside her, his expression unreadable. Home, he told the driver as the Bentley glided away from the curb. Maria pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the city blur past. She didn't speak. Neither did he. But in the silence, an invisible thread had already begun to tighten between them, one that neither of them yet understood. The right penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a 70-story tower. It wasn't just an apartment. It was a statement of power. Walls of glass looked down over the city lights. Marble floors gleamed under recessed lighting, and abstract paintings worth more than most houses hung in curated perfection. When they stepped inside, Maria hesitated in the foyer, clutching her quilt. She had only ever entered through the service elevator, never through the grand entrance where a chandelier glittered like falling stars. Sit, Alexander instructed, pointing toward the living room. I shouldn't. Sit, Maria. She obeyed, lowering herself onto the edge of a leather sofa. It was softer than any bed she'd slept in for years. She kept her eyes on her lap, feeling terribly out of place, like a stain in an art gallery. Alexander disappeared into the kitchen, then returned with a steaming mug. Drink. She took it with both hands, hot chocolate. The sweetness stung her throat, reminding her just how empty her stomach had been. He watched her silently for a moment, then leaned back against the opposite sofa. Why didn't you tell anyone? Her fingers titanned around the mug. Because people don't want problems with their maids. If I complain, I lose my job. If I ask for help, I lose my dignity. You almost lost your life, he said. Evenly. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. I've managed worse. Something in her voice, the quiet steel beneath the weariness, pulled at him. He wasn't used to this. People begged him for opportunities, for favors, for handouts. Maria asked for nothing. Even now, she tried to guard her pride like it was the last coin in her pocket. He exhaled, rubbing his temple. You're staying here tonight. Her head snapped up. What? You'll sleep in the guest room. Tomorrow, We'll figure something out." "No, sir, I can't intrude, Maria." His tone carried the weight of a man used to being obeyed. "This is not up for debate." Her lips parted, then closed. She looked away, swallowing hard. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a curt nod, rising to his feet. "Come, I'll show you the room." That night, as Maria lay beneath crisp linen sheets, staring up at a ceiling far higher than any she had known, she felt both relief and terror. Relief that she wasn't shivering on the concrete. Terror at what tomorrow might bring, because nothing in her life had ever come without a price. And she couldn't help but wonder, what would be the price of his kindness? The next morning, Alexander woke early, as he always did. Years of discipline had trained his body to rise before dawn, to conquer the day before anyone else touched it. But as he walked down the hallway, the sound of movement drew him toward the guest room. Maria was already awake. Through the half-open door, he saw her standing by the bed, smoothing the sheets, tucking the corners with precise care. She had dressed in the same worn clothes from the night before, her hair pulled back, her face freshly washed. "Maria," he said quietly. She turned, startled. "Oh, good morning, sir." "You don't have to do that," he told her, her hands stilled on the sheets. It didn't feel right leaving it undone. He studied her for a long moment. "Breakfast is in the kitchen. Eat before you go." Her eyes flickered. "Before I go?" "Yes." His voice was calm, but something tightened in his chest. "We'll talk after." Maria nodded, though her stomach clenched. She had dreamed, foolishly, that maybe she could stay invisible here. But reality was knocking again, and she feared it wouldn't be kind. As she followed him to the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread filled the air. She sat at the counter, eating quietly while he read through emails on his tablet. Every so often, his eyes flicked toward her, unreadable. When she finished, he set the tablet down. "Maria," he said, his voice steady, "tell me everything." And just like that, the wall she had so carefully built around her life began to crack. Maria's hands twisted in her lap, her nails digging into her palms as though pain might anchor her words. She hated talking about herself. It made her feel exposed, like holding her heart out where anyone could trample it. But Alexander's eyes, cool, commanding, patient, didn't let her escape. "I came here 10 years ago," she began softly. "From Guatemala, my sister and I. We wanted to send money home to our parents. She got sick. I took every extra shift I could to pay for her medicine, but it wasn't enough. She passed 4 years ago." Her voice trembled, but she pushed on. "I've been alone since. I rent a small room in Queens, clean houses, do laundry, whatever I can. But the rent keeps going up. 2 months ago, I started falling behind. My landlord gave me notice last week. Yesterday, he changed the locks. I didn't know where to go." Alexander listened, his hands steepled beneath his chin. For once, his sharp business mind, so used to profit margins and negotiation tactics, found no tidy solution. Maria wasn't a failing deal to be salvaged or a competitor to be outmaneuvered. She was a woman who had fallen through the cracks of the very city he had helped build higher and higher. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked finally. Maria lowered her gaze. "Because you're my employer. I didn't want pity. I need to work, not charity." "Charity," he repeated, almost bitterly. "Is that what you think this is?" Her silence was answer enough. Alexander leaned back, exhaling sharply. He was a man who thrived on control, on bending circumstances until they obeyed. Yet this felt different. He couldn't just write a check and walk away. For reasons he couldn't name, he wanted to do more. "You'll stay here for now," he said firmly. Her head jerked up. "Mr. Wright." "Alexander," he corrected, "and I'm not asking. Until we find you a permanent solution, this is your home." Maria's throat tightened. No one had called her home to anything in years, but fear clung to her words. "What will people think?" The other staff, the neighbors. They'll think nothing, he said coolly. Because it's none of their business. Her heart pounded. To her, the idea of living under the same roof as her boss, her billionaire. Boss felt dangerous, absurd, impossible. Yet when she looked at him, she didn't see judgment. She saw resolve. And for the first time, she allowed herself to breathe. Days turned into a week. Maria tried to keep to herself, slipping quietly through the penthouse as though she were still an employee, not a guest. She rose early, cleaned the kitchen before the housekeepers arrived, and often disappeared into the laundry room just to stay busy. But Alexander noticed, every night when he returned from late meetings, he found evidence of her touch. A blanket folded neatly on the couch, fresh flowers in a vase, a small container of soup left warming on the stove. She wasn't trying to repay him, not really. It was just who she was, a woman who gave even when she had nothing. One evening, as he loosened his tie, he caught her in the dining room polishing the silver candlesticks. "You don't have to do that," he said. She looked up, startled. "I just thought, you're not my maid here, Maria." Her cheeks colored. "It's hard to sit still." Something tugged at him then, something he hadn't felt in years. He crossed the room, took the cloth gently from her hand, and set it aside. "Then don't sit still," he said. "Come eat dinner with me." Her eyes widened. "I can't." "Yes, you can," he interrupted. "No more hiding." It was the first dinner they shared as equals, though Maria hardly knew how to act. She sat stiffly at the edge of the chair, her hands folded in her lap, while he poured wine and asked questions. "What did you want to be before you came here?" The question caught her off guard. She blinked, then gave a small, wistful laugh. "A teacher. I used to pretend with my little cousins back home. I'd line them up, give them books, even assign homework. Why didn't you pursue it?" She shrugged. "Dreams don't pay rent. Cleaning houses does." Alexander studied her across the candlelight. Most people he dined with spoke of board takeovers and vacation homes. Maria spoke of lost dreams with a simplicity that struck him harder than any business deal ever could. "You'd have been a good teacher," he said quietly. Her throat tightened. No one had ever told her that before, but not everyone saw her presence kindly. By the second week, whispers began among the staff. The housekeeper, Denise, narrowed her eyes whenever Maria passed. One afternoon, Maria overheard two others in the pantry. "Can you believe she's living here?" In the penthouse, no less. Some people know how to climb ladders the easy way. Maria's cheeks burned. She slipped away before they noticed her, her chest aching. She had fought so hard to keep her dignity intact, and now, despite Alexander's kindness, she felt it unraveling in the shadows of gossip. That evening, when Alexander returned, he found her standing by the glass wall, staring down at the glittering city. "They think I'm with you," she whispered before he could speak. He stilled. "Who?" "The staff, maybe others. They think I'm here because..." She trailed off, ashamed to finish. His jaw clenched. "That's nonsense." "Maybe to you," she said, voice cracking. "But to them it's everything. I don't want to be your scandal." Alexander's chest tightened with something unfamiliar, protectiveness, maybe even anger. He had weathered headlines about hostile takeovers, lawsuits, affairs he never had. But the thought of Maria being reduced to gossip felt intolerable. "You're not a scandal," he said firmly. "And if anyone says otherwise, they'll answer to me." Her eyes brimmed. "I can't live under your roof forever." "Then let's find you something better," he said. "Not just a roof. A life." Maria shook her head, overwhelmed. "Why are you doing this for me?" He held her gaze, his voice low, almost raw. "Because someone should have long before now." The weeks that followed changed them both. For Maria, life slowly regained color. She began to smile again, especially when Alexander insisted she join him for breakfast instead of eating alone. Sometimes he asked her about her childhood. Other times he made her try dishes she had never tasted: sushi, creme brulee, truffle pasta. For Alexander, the change was subtler but deeper. He began canceling late-night meetings, preferring instead to come home and find Maria curled up with a book on the sofa. He laughed more an easy, unguarded laugh that startled his assistant the first time she heard it. And at night, when the England city stretched endlessly outside his windows, he found himself wondering not about his next skyscraper, but about the woman sleeping just down the hall. Still, tension brewed. One morning, as Maria carried groceries in from the lobby, a reporter recognized her. Within days, a tabloid headline screamed across the stands: "Billionaire bachelor hides secret woman in penthouse." Alexander tossed the paper onto his desk, fury burning in his eyes. Maria stood frozen, her face pale. "This is my fault," she whispered. "No," he snapped, then gentled his tone. "This is what they do. They invent stories. But people will believe it. Let them," he said fiercely. "The only truth that matters is ours." Maria wanted to believe him. But when she walked through the streets, she felt eyes lingering longer than before. And inside, a fear gnawed at her, the fear that her presence in his world would eventually destroy the fragile peace she had found. That night, she knocked on his office door. He looked up from his laptop, surprised. "Alexander," she said softly, "maybe it's time I left." His chest constricted. "Where would you go?" "I can find another room, another job." "You had another room, another job," he reminded her. "And look where it left you." Tears welled. "I don't want to be the reason your name gets dragged through the mud." He rose, coming around the desk. His hand hovered near hers, not quite touching. "Maria, do you really think I care?" "What they write," her lips trembled. "Maybe you should." For a long moment, silence pressed between them, thick with unspoken things. Then Alexander said, with quiet conviction, "The only thing I care about is that you're not on the street again." Maria's breath hitched. Something dangerous, something hopeful, sparked in her chest. But before either could say more, the phone rang.